Hi, my name is Nancy Love, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Planet Peace Project. I am making this as a kind of year end recap of some of my most successful videos. Successful being defined as the ones that people have mentioned to me and the ones that seem to have helped people the most. I have about 58 or 60 videos at the YouTube channel, The Planet Peace Project. And most of these have to do with a concept I call micropeace. Micropeace is what I think of as how to be a peaceful person living in a conflicted world. The Planet Peace Project is about education in micropeace so that individuals can learn how to become more peaceful in their own lives. Macropeace, I'd like to ultimately, eventually, send mediators to war torn areas of the world to see if we can help them talk through their problems instead of shoot at each other. I also would like to train volunteers and advocates in a variety of areas and get people with wonderful skill sets that are sitting idle to come forward and teach for free people who want to learn for free. A number of volunteer and advocacy skills, including but not limited to animal rescue, human rights advocacy, child welfare advocacy, and so forth. Even how to support first responders in natural disasters. And ultimately, there might be a celebration aspect that would include now having in home private Planet Peace picnics on your living room floor. I used to want to do festivals, but in this current environment, it's unlikely that it would be safe to gather in large numbers fairly soon. Planet Peace is at www.planetpeace.love, and you're welcome to peruse the ideas there. I'd like to generate a world forum to deal with all the world's major issues. It's a big deal. Now, as far as the most helpful videos, what I've been hearing from people over the last year or two is that one of the best ones was how to dethug a bully. Back in the spring of 2020, I made a handful of videos that were actually live on Facebook. They weren't on YouTube, but they were live on Facebook. And they dealt with things that I learned in school that still help me and serve me well. Incidentally, I just was reminded to tell you this reminds me every single day of my 5 cats. They were taken from me by unscrupulous individuals, and I will find my cats, make them safe once more, and bring them home. Always, always remember, I'm not giving up on those I love, and they should not give up on me. So, more about how to dethug a bully, which is a fairly salient issue for a lot of us. Um, Briefly, that video was about how when I was 6 years old, a young girl who had been just a regular kid suddenly started slugging other children, mostly other young girls, which simply was not done in a small town in West Texas. And although boys were encouraged to solve their problems with their fists, little girls absolutely were not. So I pulled her aside, found out that her family was splitting up and that her mom was really struggling financially and domestically, and the little girl was having to grow up really fast and become what is called a caretaker child. She was having to learn how to become, at the tender age of 6, someone who was mothering the younger children in the family, and she was worried that she and the younger kids and her mom would soon all be sleeping in their car. Here again, this just didn't happen in small towns decades ago. So the little girl felt very disadvantaged and was acting out her anguish and her fear on other children. Once I realized that, I was able to help her. And How to Dethug a Bully is the story of how that went, and it went well. But basically, the bullying was a result of being bullied and feeling that she was in the out group. As soon as somebody, anybody, it could have been any of us, as soon as one person cared about her situation, reached out and pulled her back toward the in group, pulled her back into the community, she was extremely grateful. And who knows that that didn't change the trajectory of her entire life. If one person reaches out to someone who's in that much need and says, I care about you, what's going on? How can we fix this together? That can change worlds. Another um, very helpful video that I made was called "What is Kitchen Sinking and Why You Shouldn't Do It." Kitchen sinking is a concept I learned when I was studying graduate psychology. It has to do with when you're arguing with a spouse about something that happened recently, or your boyfriend or girlfriend, your child, your employer, whatever, bringing up every single thing that's ever happened in the past and trying to rehash through all of that. That's what you call talking about everything but the kitchen sink. That's why it's called kitchen sinking. That's a concept I studied in the 1980s in interpersonal relationships and industrial psychology. And it's not helpful because chances are really good that if you've been with those individuals for a while, you've already dealt with all those things. Many of them will have seemed to have been resolved. And when you kitchen sink someone and start saying, well, 4 years ago you looked at that waitress, or 6 years ago you were rude to my mom, then what you've done is you're just ripping away all the scar tissue that is healed over those old wounds, and you're not dealing with what happened recently. If what really got you upset was, let's say, somebody didn't pick up the car on time from the mechanic yesterday, or was late to pick up the kids from daycare, then deal with that. But deal with it effectively, cogently, specifically, precisely, and stop kitchen sinking each other, because the word sink is in there for a reason. People have said, I was kitchen sinking my husband, or my husband was kitchen sinking me, and I told that person about what you said, and we stopped doing it. We deal now more effectively with what's going on now, and we let the past and the peace we've made in the past about those issues, we let that lie. Another helpful video that people have mentioned a lot, and I actually had people hugging me over this one, was where I talked about here again, something I learned in elementary school that still serves me well: how to overcome jealousy. When I was 8 years old, there was a beautiful young teenage girl that everybody admired and that I was secretly jealous of, but I didn't like the way jealousy felt inside me. I was a very spiritual kid. I'd been reading everything from the Christian Bible to Buddhism to Hinduism. I'd been dealing with secular philosophies, uh, starting at the age of 7. And so by the time I was 8, I knew that bitterness consumes the vessel that contains it, and I did not want to be so consumed. So, in order to analyze what that feeling tone was doing to me physiologically and emotionally, I analyzed why I felt those ways toward that young woman who was, the sweetest person. It was like knowing Gidget, or, she was just this wonderful person. She was harmless. And once I analyzed that, I did it on paper. I made a list of the things that she had that I wanted, and how could I get them without taking them from her. And it was things like charm and sincere interest in people, and her own spiritual and religious relationship with God, and her wonderful relationship with a boyfriend. That they had a very mature relationship in which they seemed to really like each other, which was rare in teen relationships back then and possibly now. Um, Teenage relationships tend to be built on more shallow bases, on attraction, on the popular media culture. And here, those two had a relationship that I really could see going on for decades. That I thought they may be 16, but they could go on and become very successful as husband and wife, 30 years later. Why was that? So then I analyzed what those aspects of their relationship were, and they included things like they were one another's best cheerleader. They sincerely liked and supported each other. And that was very instructive for an 8-year old kid to examine a relationship like that and figure out what made it work and how it was different from a lot of relationships that obviously didn't. And so I went on and I made this list. And you know, by the end of making that list, I didn't hate that girl anymore. I had cured jealousy by making the list of the things she had, which were all positive qualities. And many of them I could develop on my own. Within 30 days, she and I were friends. In spite of an 8-year age difference, she embraced me, I embraced her, and I had a 16-year-old best friend all of a sudden because I wasn't satisfied with feeling apart and feeling envious. I wanted to know what she had that was so beautiful that I wanted it. And once people started hearing about that, people would walk up to me and say, "Nancy, I made a list. I was jealous of so and so." Or people said that they made their kids watch that. People, one high school teacher I know from Florida said that he had his teenage students watch that, and the How to Dethug a Bully um, video as well. So that's very fulfilling to me. I'm not getting paid to do this. If anybody wants to donate to my cause, direct message me or somehow connect with me, and I'll send you a way to send support. But these videos are not monetized. These videos are from my heart, and they are things that I feel need to be said, and sooner or later they must be said, and sooner is better than later. Keep in mind, if we wait until the perfect time, the perfect circumstances to do certain things, we may never get them done at all. Now is the day, seize it. Then I did some videos about addiction and how people can get diminishing returns from using more of a substance that initially made them feel good. And I also, around that same time, posted some things specifically for cocaine addicts. I've never been particularly involved with that, but um, I did have a cocaine addict tell me fairly recently this fall that he and his wife appreciated my trying to help them. And I said, "You're welcome. You know, I can't imagine what you're going through, but that must be a tough road to hoe. And I hope you make it. I hope you cure yourselves and your family from the viciousness of cocaine addiction." So, what we were studying with that was the upside down U, and where you get the concept of diminishing returns is that virtually all indices that affect human beings, the physiology or the mental state, can be plotted on a U curve or on a curve. And sometimes, as we all know, that's a scaling up this way, or sometimes it's a variable, it's a sine curve that weaves up and down like blood sugar. Blood sugar is something that goes up and down and up and down. With all these things that people get addicted to, it's a U-shaped curve. And it's interesting that so many different types of things can be plotted on this. With something like amphetamines and cocaine, even way too much caffeine, the curve is going to be a sharp U. You're going to feel a lot more stimulated very, very quickly, but somewhere right along in here, you've had so much that your brain becomes desensitized to it, your body's receptors for that specific biochemical are going to be full. And when your brain is full, you can keep doing as much as you have, and it's not going to make you feel any better. In fact, ironically, it can actually make you feel worse. Believe it or not, if you take certain stimulants to excess, they can actually ultimately be sedating. And whereas you may be doing your cocaine or your speed or whatever to feel more effective, more productive, more stimulated, and more active, what you might end up is passing out and falling into a deep sleep, because what's happened then when you're over here on this side of the U curve is that your body is so exhausted and your circulatory system is so full of those chemicals that you actually have to sleep it off. Sleep is called the great brain cleanser. There is not one thing better than sleep. If you've had too much of anything, and people who've passed out from having too much alcohol will attest to that, they wake up and they feel better. While you're asleep, your brain can repair itself, cleanse itself, and you wake up feeling significantly better than you did before. With a lot of these indices, you might find a curve that is more shallow, more closer to the mean, but you still have this U-shaped curve. And I think that one of the things that is plotted frequently along this type of curve is antidepressants. People take antidepressants for the first time, they start feeling better, they take more, their doctor is going to increase that dose because the effects start tapering off. And eventually, they're doing so much of that particular substance that they are not going to get any better. And in fact, they start feeling worse. If you talk to people who've been on antidepressants, usually more than 4 to 6 months, they may not be getting anything out of it anymore. And that's where we need to talk about things like cognitive therapy, talk therapy, meditation, reading, self help books, using your friends, using music, using exercise. But there are a lot of ways around depression that don't involve taking pharmaceuticals. And if more people realize that the pharmaceutical itself is a whole new crutch and a form of dependency, probably in many cases, then they realize that becoming dependent on an expensive pharmaceutical is not going to cure your depression. It may make you feel better initially, but eventually, I've heard people who are on antidepressants say they were a whole new source of depression. And here again, I did read a 400-page book in the 1980s on just the side effects of antidepressants. 400 pages, this thick, a book, small print, about just the side effects. And when you got to them, it's kind of ironic that depression is considered a side effect of antidepressants. Depression. So is suicidal ideations, thoughts of suicide. Why are you taking antidepressant if it's going to make you want to kill yourself? Excuse me. Hello. Somebody needs to examine that. And then we have the issue of weight gain. A lot of antidepressants can cause an initial weight gain, and it even states in the circular and in the books about side effects of antidepressants you that in itself is something that causes depression. You feel sluggish, your estrogen levels go higher, your hormonal situation shifts, you feel less attractive, whatever. You feel less athletic, you feel less energy. And so, one of the primary side effects of antidepressants is going to cause depression. So, the upside down U curve, it turns out, has been a very helpful concept for people because a lot of people were in that situation. They never had seen it plotted on a graph that way. They didn't know that they were getting to that apex of use, that their brains and their body was becoming desensitized, and that no matter how much more of whatever they were doing, including alcohol, they weren't going to feel any better. In fact, they were only going to feel worse. And let's see what else. The last, I think, most helpful video that I've made within the last year had to do with moral dignity and concentrating on what you want instead of scattering yourself all over. And it has to do with the concept of seeking success rather than sensation. People have mentioned that that is a very helpful concept because maybe they didn't have the training in Hinduism, yoga, Buddhism, Christianity, secular philosophies like William James and Soren Kierkegaard and Blaise Pascal and all these, Immanuel Kant. I studied all this when I was a very small child, and then again when I was in college. So, um, the idea of living from the soul level, stepping back, not living from your ego, the me, more type of standpoint where you are a victim. You allow your individuality or consciousness to be a victim of our popular media culture, and you're always seeking more of everything. You're always seeking a bigger car, a bigger house, a fancier this, a more expensive that. No, you start living from the soul level. You start backing away from what the popular media culture tells you you're supposed to want. And as soon as you start realizing that you can think essentially like an eternal or immortal soul instead of like an egomaniac driven to the cause of more and more, then and I think possibly only then you start realizing that in a lot of ways in your life you've been seeking sensation, immediate pleasure, instant gratification rather than long-term success. And there, people, there is maturity. When you realize that you want to seek success rather than sensation, you are becoming mature and have the capacity to make some real progress in your life. To seek to seek success instead of sensation in relationships is an especially important concept because when people cheat in on a monogamous relationship, they are destroying it. They are destroying the foundation of it. And if you know that you have control over what you fantasize about and what you concentrate on mentally, then you start taking responsibility for it, redirecting your fantasies, redirecting your consciousness when you start mentally concentrating on what amounts to the wrong thing, and you start using your mental capacity, the time of your mind, to concentrate on the goodness of the relationships that you claim you want. So if you've made a commitment to someone, you don't sit around fantasizing about this person or that person, you fantasize about your spouse. If you claim you want success in your job, you don't sit around wishing you were on a desert island somewhere, on a paradise island somewhere. You concentrate on your job. If you say that you want something, you concentrate on it, and you do have significantly more control over your mental focus than most people think they do. I am at an advantage because I studied all this when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, and then again when I was 19, 20, 21, that age. But a lot of adults have never even studied the concept of living from the soul level rather than the ego level. They've never made that distinction between living from the soul and living from the id, or what Freud called the id, or the ego level. And a lot of people have never really got to the fact that they do have a whole heck of a lot more control over what they fantasize about and concentrate on and focus on mentally than they realize or that they're taking responsibility for, and how much redirecting your mental focus can assist you in achieving real success and advancing toward your dreams and the direction of your goals rather than always seeking mere sensation, which, as we all know, our popular media culture tells us we're supposed to be doing. So I hope that a brief, quick recap of these most helpful videos has been helpful for you. And I just want to let you know that those of you who have come forward and said that the work that I've been doing in these micro-peace studies has been useful to you and fulfilling, and you've gained some insight and some sort of personal progress from it. I just hope you know how much that means to me, because that's what it's for. That is exactly why I'm doing this. I'm doing it for you. Thank you.